My dad stood up at the dinner table, looked me straight in the eye, and said I needed to sign my house over to my brother because his girlfriend was pregnant and he was going to be a father soon. I looked back at him completely calm and said, "I'll think about it." Then I drove home, called a locksmith first thing the next morning, changed every lock in my house, and cut off contact with my entire family. Before I get into the full story, I want to know where you are watching this from. Drop your city or state in the comments right now. And if you have ever been asked to give up something you worked hard for just because someone else made a choice that was not your responsibility, go ahead and hit that like button. It means more than you know. Subscribe if you are new here, because this story is just getting started, and what happened after that dinner table moment is something you are not going to want to miss. So let me take you back to where this all really began. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, in a house that looked perfectly normal from the outside. My dad, Warren, worked as an accountant. My mom, Diane, was a part-time nurse. My older brother, Shepard, was 3 years older than me, and then there was me, Camellia, 4 people under one roof. From the outside, we looked like a regular middle-class family in a quiet suburb. But the way that house actually worked on the inside was a completely different story. The imbalance did not show up all at once. It built slowly, one moment at a time, and each moment stacked on top of the last until it was just the air I breathed growing up. The first time I understood that Shepard and I were not being raised the same way, I was 10 years old. Shepard had been playing ball in the backyard and kicked it straight through the neighbor's window. I was not even outside when it happened, but when my dad sat us both down, he told me to go next door and apologize. Not Shepard, me. When I asked why, he said, "Because girls need to know how to smooth things over." I walked to that neighbor's front door and apologized for something I did not do. Shepard stayed inside and watched television. I was 13 when both Shepard and I said we wanted to learn piano. There was one music school nearby that offered lessons on Saturday mornings. My dad enrolled Shepard and told me the budget only covered one student. He said, "Boys need more extracurricular activities to get into a good college." I did not argue. I went home and started watching free tutorials online and taught myself for the next 3 years. Shepard quit piano after 4 months. The one that cut the deepest came when I was 16. I had worked all semester to pull a 4.0 GPA. My report card came in the mail, and I put it on the kitchen counter, proud of it in a way I had not been proud of much before. That same week, my dad bought Shepard a used motorcycle because Shepard had just gotten his license. On the night my report card was sitting on that counter, my dad picked it up, looked it over, nodded once, said "good job," and walked back to the couch to watch football. No dinner out, no phone call to relatives to share the news, nothing. Shepard's motorcycle got a full tank of gas and a new helmet that weekend. Then came the college applications. I got into the University of Florida with a partial scholarship. I was 17, and I thought maybe this would finally be the moment things evened out. My parents were already covering Shepard's tuition at Florida State University, where he had enrolled 2 years earlier. When I showed my dad the acceptance letter and the scholarship breakdown, he told me the remaining balance after my scholarship would have to be my responsibility. He said, "You already have help. That is more than most people get." So I worked 2 jobs through all 4 years of college, waitressing on weekends, filing paperwork at an office on weekday evenings. I graduated with no debt because I paid every dollar myself. My mom, Diane, watched all of this happen and never once stepped in. She was not a cruel person. She cooked dinner and asked about my day and remembered my favorite color. But every time I tried to bring up the difference in how Shepard and I were treated, she would say, "Your father has his reasons," and change the subject. Her silence was its own kind of answer. The one person who named it plainly was my best friend Priya, who had known me since 9th grade. She watched my family from the outside with clear eyes, and one afternoon, during our junior year of high school, she said to me, "Camellia, they treat you like a guest in that house, like someone who is expected to be grateful for being included." I did not argue with her. I had been feeling that exact thing for years and just did not have the words for it until she said it out loud. I graduated from the University of Florida with a degree in business administration. The ceremony was on a Saturday morning in May. My parents did not come. They were in Tampa that day helping Shepard move into a new apartment, a move he had needed help with because he had been between jobs again and could not afford movers. I found out the night before when my mom texted to say they would not make it. Priya drove 2 hours to sit in the stands and cheer when my name was called. She brought a bouquet of yellow flowers and took pictures on her phone. Those are the only graduation photos I have. I moved to Tampa, Florida, and started working at Lunaris Collective, a brand management company. I came in as a coordinator, which was the entry-level position, and I learned everything I could as fast as I could. The pay was modest at first, but I kept my expenses tight. I shared an apartment with a roommate for the first 2 years, cooked at home almost every night, and put a fixed amount into a dedicated savings account every single month without touching it. Back in Orlando, Shepard moved through jobs without settling into any of them. He worked at a car dealership for a while, then at a gym, then tried to start a landscaping business that lasted about 8 months. Each time something did not work out, he went back to my parents' house in Orlando to regroup. Each time he showed up, my parents welcomed him back without question. My dad would call me occasionally during those years and mention that Shepard was figuring things out, said in a tone that treated it as a temporary situation rather than a pattern. I kept building. At 29, I was promoted to senior manager at Lunaris Collective. I had been there 6 years at that point and had a track record that spoke for itself. My salary had grown significantly, my savings were in solid shape, and I had spent the previous 2 years researching neighborhoods in Tampa, talking to a mortgage advisor, and figuring out exactly what I could afford without overextending myself. At 34, I bought a 3-bedroom house in Tampa. It was in my name only. I had paid the down payment entirely from my own savings, no co-signer, no family contribution, no gift money from anyone, just the money I had earned and saved over 10 years of steady work. On the day I picked up the keys, Priya was with me. We stood outside the front door together and she hugged me and said, "You did it." I did not respond right away. I just stood there and let it settle. That house represented something specific to me. It was proof that everything I had built alone, and no one could rewrite that history. When I told my family I had bought a house, Warren called and asked why I had not bought in Orlando to stay closer to them. Diane sent a congratulations text, and then within the same message, asked if there was a spare room because Shepard was looking for a place to stay temporarily. I replied that the house was set up as my workspace and living space, and I did not have room for guests. That was the first time I had ever said no to my family in a direct, clear way. It felt strange. But I did not take it back. 7 months after I bought the house, on a regular Thursday evening, my dad called me. He sounded relaxed. He said Diane was making pot roast that Sunday and they wanted me to come home for dinner. Pot roast was something my mom had made on special occasions when I was growing up. The invitation felt normal enough. I thought about declining because the drive from Tampa to Orlando is about 1 hour and 45 minutes, but I told myself that keeping some kind of connection to my family was worth the effort. I said I would be there. I arrived at their house in Orlando at 6 in the evening on Sunday. When I walked in, Shepard was already seated at the dining table. Sitting next to him was a woman I had never met before. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s, with dark hair, and she was visibly pregnant, somewhere around 5 months along. My dad introduced her as Lourdes, Shepard's girlfriend. No one had mentioned she would be there. No one had mentioned the pregnancy at all before that evening. I sat down. Dinner was served. For the first 20 minutes or so, the conversation was surface level. Warren asked about my job. Diane passed the bread. Lourdes was quiet but polite when spoken to. Shepard talked about a delivery driver job he had recently picked up. I kept my responses easy and did not read too much into anything yet, even though something in the room felt like it was being held in place deliberately. Then my dad set down his fork. He looked at me and began speaking in the same steady tone he used when he had already made up his mind about something. He said that Shepard was going to be a father soon. He said that having a child meant Shepard needed stability, specifically stable housing. He said my house in Tampa had 3 bedrooms and I was living there by myself, and that it was a lot of space for one person. And then he said that the fair thing, in his view, would be for me to sign the house over to Shepard so that Shepard and Lourdes could raise their child in a proper home. He said all of this without raising his voice. He said it the way someone describes a logical solution to a practical problem. I set my own fork down. I looked at my dad and I said, "You are asking me to sign my house over to Shepard?" He nodded. He added that I was still young, that I had a strong income, that I could rent somewhere comfortable in the short term and buy again later. He said it like it was a minor inconvenience I could absorb without much trouble. I looked around the table. Diane was looking at her plate. She did not look up. Shepard was watching me with an expression that told me he had known this conversation was coming. He did not look embarrassed. He looked like he was waiting to see how a transaction would resolve. Lourdes had turned her face toward the window. She was clearly uncomfortable, and I got the sense she had not been the one to engineer this. I looked back at Warren. I said, "I will think about it." Then I picked up my fork and finished my dinner. Nobody seemed to know what to make of that answer. The rest of the meal was quiet and short. I said goodbye, got into my car, and started the drive back to Tampa. For 1 hour and 45 minutes on the highway, I did not play music. I did not call anyone. I drove and I let my thoughts organize themselves. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Tampa, I already knew exactly what I was going to do. I just needed the night to make sure. Saturday morning, I called a locksmith. My family did not have a key to my house, so the lock change was not about keeping anyone out physically. It was about doing something concrete to mark the boundary I had already decided on. When the locksmith finished and handed me the new keys, I held them in my hand for a moment. This was my house. That had not changed and was not going to change. On Monday, I called Marcus Webb, a real estate attorney I had been referred to through a colleague at Lunaris Collective. I brought all my paperwork, the deed, the purchase records, the mortgage documents. Marcus reviewed everything carefully and confirmed what I already knew but needed to hear from a professional. The house was in my name exclusively. There was no co-ownership, no family financial contribution recorded anywhere in the transaction history, and no legal mechanism by which anyone could compel me to transfer ownership without my voluntary agreement. He told me directly, "They have no legal claim." I thanked him and left his office with that clarity in hand. That same Monday evening, I sent my dad a text message. I kept it short. I wrote, "I have thought about it. The answer is no. I need some space right now." Then I turned off notifications for his number and my mom's number. I did not block either of them. I just stopped letting their messages interrupt my days. I did not send anything to Shepard. There was nothing I needed to say to him. That night I called Priya and told her everything, starting from the dinner table and ending with the text I had just sent. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You handled that exactly right. Do not explain yourself to any of them." I did not need to be talked into my decision. I had already made it. But hearing Priya say that settled something in me, and I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. I went to work. I came home. I started a small garden in the backyard because I had been meaning to do it since I moved in and kept putting it off. I repainted the guest room a color I had picked out over a year earlier and never gotten around to using. I bought a set of outdoor chairs I had seen in a shop window months before and put them on the back patio exactly where I had always imagined they would go. None of those things were dramatic, they were just mine. Warren started calling repeatedly about 2 weeks after I sent the text. I did not answer. He left voicemails. The first few were calm. He said the family needed to sit down together. He said Shepard was struggling. He said the baby was coming and there was no plan in place. His voice had the tone of a man who believed that if he explained the situation clearly enough, I would eventually see things his way. Then Diane started texting. Her messages were long. She wrote about not sleeping well. She wrote that she had done her best raising 2 children and that families were supposed to support each other during hard times. She mentioned specific memories from my childhood, times she had been there for me, in a way that was clearly meant to remind me of what I owed her. There was no acknowledgement of what had been asked of me at that dinner table, no mention of whether it was a reasonable thing to ask. Just pressure dressed up in the language of love and sacrifice. Shepard called me directly one evening. It was the first time in several years that he had called me without my parents being the ones to set it up. He did not start with an apology or an explanation. He told me he knew we had never been close but that this was a family situation and I was making it harder than it needed to be. He used the word selfish. He said I was being selfish for holding onto a house I did not need to keep to myself when he was about to have a child. He said it the way people say things they have already decided are facts. I let him finish. I said, "I heard you," then I ended the call. About 3 weeks after the dinner, a letter arrived at my house from an attorney's office representing Warren. The letter was written in legal language, but the argument it made was thin. It suggested that my ability to purchase the house had been supported by family resources and implied that this created a basis for revisiting the ownership arrangement. It did not cite any specific financial contribution because there was none to cite. It was a document designed to create anxiety, not to win a legal argument. I photographed it and sent it to Marcus the same afternoon. He called me within an hour. He said the letter had no legal merit. He said there was no recorded financial contribution from my family in any part of the home purchase, which meant there was no legal basis for a claim of any kind. He said he would draft a formal response on my behalf and send it to the other attorney's office. I told him to go ahead. After the formal response was sent, Warren's attorney went quiet. No follow-up letter arrived. No court filing appeared. The legal pressure had been a bluff, and now that bluff had been called, there was nothing left to back it up. But Warren found another approach. He started reaching out to relatives. His sister Roslyn called me one afternoon with a tone of concern she had not bothered to disguise very well. She said she had heard what was going on and that she hoped I understood how much pressure Shepard was under. She said the family was worried. She said she hoped I would reconsider. I told her politely that it was a private matter and said goodbye. A cousin named Derek sent me a text that said, "Everyone is talking about this." I read it, blocked his number and moved on. Then one evening I came home from a long day at Lunaris Collective, and Warren was standing in my driveway. He had driven from Orlando without calling ahead. He was standing near the mailbox, and when I pulled in and got out of my car, he looked at me and said he just wanted to talk. He looked tired. He was older than the version of him I carried in my head from childhood. Standing in my driveway in the Tampa evening, he just looked like a man who had driven a long way and was not sure it had been the right decision. I stood near my front door with my keys in my hand. I felt something I had not expected to feel at that moment. Not anger, not fear, but a specific kind of grief. The grief of recognizing that the man in front of me had made this drive not to apologize, not to understand what he had asked of me, but to try one more time to get a different answer. I said, "Go home, Dad. If you want to communicate, have your attorney contact mine." Then I unlocked my door, walked inside, and closed it behind me. I called Priya afterward. I did not need advice, I just needed to hear a familiar voice. She stayed on the phone with me for an hour. We talked about other things, her work, a movie she had seen recently, plans for the following month. She knew I did not want to spend the whole night going over the same ground. That was what I needed from her, and she gave it without being asked. After Marcus sent the formal legal response, the pressure from Warren's side stopped completely. No more letters arrived. No attorney made contact again. Whatever conversation Warren had with his lawyer after receiving the response clearly resulted in the decision to drop it entirely. About 2 months after that Sunday dinner, Priya mentioned to me in passing that she had heard through a mutual acquaintance that Shepard and Lourdes had signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb of Orlando, not far from Warren and Diane's house. They had sorted out their housing without my house being involved at all. There had never been a moment where my giving up my home was actually the only option. It had just been the preferred option for everyone except me. When Priya told me, I said, "Good, I am glad they found something." That was all I felt about it. No satisfaction from being right. Just the simple confirmation that the situation had resolved itself the way situations usually do when people are forced to actually solve their own problems. A few weeks after Lourdes delivered the baby, Diane sent me a message letting me know the baby had arrived. A boy. They named him Owen. At the end of the message, she wrote that the family could use extra support now that there was a newborn in the picture, and asked if I would consider coming to Orlando more often. She had not apologized for the dinner. She had not acknowledged that asking me to sign over my house was something that needed to be addressed between us. She had moved past it entirely and was now making a new request. I read the message carefully and understood exactly what it was. Not an olive branch, not a repair attempt, just a new ask dressed up in the idea of family connection. I wrote back one line, "Congratulations to Shepard and Lourdes." I did not respond to the rest of the message. Warren called one more time, a few months after Owen was born. The conversation was different from all the ones before it. He did not mention the house. He asked how work was going, whether Tampa had been getting a lot of rain, how I was feeling generally. He kept his voice light, like the dinner had been a minor disagreement that time had already smoothed over. When he started to say he thought we should get together sometime to catch up, I said, "Dad, I still need more time. When I am ready to talk, I will reach out to you." He paused, then said all right, and we ended the call. I did not say never. I did not say the door was open. I said the truth. I was not ready, and I would be the one to decide when that changed. On a Sunday afternoon not long after, I was sitting outside in my backyard. The tomato plants I had put in a few months earlier were producing well. The chairs I had bought were exactly where I wanted them. The afternoon light was coming through at a low angle, and the yard was quiet. I was not thinking about Warren or Shepard or Diane. I was thinking about what I wanted to cook for dinner and whether I felt like calling Priya later. That was the life I had. A house I had bought with 10 years of my own savings. A career I had built from a coordinator position up to senior manager through my own work. A friendship that had been steady since 9th grade. No one had handed me any of it. No one had co-signed anything. No one had made a call on my behalf or written a check to bridge a gap. And no one was going to take any of it from me by standing at a dinner table and framing it as the fair thing to do. I am Camellia. I own my home, not because I fought for it, because I built it and building it was enough. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my position, sitting at that dinner table when your father asked you to sign over your house, what would you have said in that moment? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story made you feel something, whether that was anger at what my family asked, relief at how it ended, or something in between, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Stories like this one do not get told often enough, and every share helps reach the person who might need this reminder that what they worked for belongs to them. If you have not subscribed yet, please do it now. New stories go up regularly, and every one of them is the kind you will want to follow from beginning to end. Thank you for spending your time with this story. I mean that. You could have watched anything today, and you chose to sit with this. I hope it leaves you feeling a little more certain about your own right to protect what is yours. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.